In this video, we're going to talk about the age of exploration, and that's the time period between 15th and 17th century. It is characterized by an adventurous spirit because Europeans left their own continent to discover and explore new worlds. But what exactly made them do this, and what did it lead to? That's what we'll discuss in this video. So the first thing that we're going to discuss is the adventurous spirit and what was the source of it. Firstly, Marco Polo's book and Marco Polo's tales from the 13th century were well known by people. These tales describe the advanced Chinese civilization and the culture in many coastal regions like Sri Lanka, Southeast Asia, the east coast of Africa, and Japan. That's why people wanted to explore, to experience new things, and to learn more about other cultures. Of course, there were many other factors that came into play here, which we'll also discuss later, but adventure was a big one. Many people also wanted to find out what they were capable of accomplishing, and one such man was Christopher Columbus, and he really wanted to explore the ocean and find a sea route to India by sailing west, which is something really absurd because before him everybody had sailed east to find India. No one had ever done that before, right? But that was what made it alluring, and there were a lot of people who wanted to prove their worth, kind of. In 1492, Columbus landed on an island in Bahamas while trying to find East Asia, and this laid the foundation for our modern day interconnected world, because for the first time the world was kind of globalized in a way. Even though Columbus was Italian, he sailed under the Spanish flag and was sponsored by the Spanish Queen Isabella. Columbus landed in the Caribbean, marking one of the first known European contacts with Central and South America. Sons of nobles that were on the lower end of the noble hierarchy were encouraged to settle in the West, where they would establish plantations and started mining, and these were Spanish nobles who were on the lower end of the hierarchy. So later, the Spanish conquest of the Inca Empire, which was a civilization in South America, the conquest of that empire made Spain extremely wealthy, primarily because they took control of mines that produced precious metals, and Spain was like really into precious metals. They mined a lot, and they became wealthy because of that, and we'll discuss a bit about that later as well. Spanish conquests led to the Columbian interchange, where exotic items, plants, animals, diseases, and people were exchanged between continents. Even though many 100,000 Spanish immigrants moved to South America to colonize it, the land was too big to populate and colonize. So what they did to compensate was that they brought in African slaves, and there were around 8 million Africans who were brought to be used as slaves in South America. And one of the reasons, by the way, that they had to bring in so many slaves, that they needed so many people to work, was because the native population in South America had died because of the diseases that they weren't immune against, that the Europeans brought in. So before Europeans came to South America, the natives had their own empires, and two really important of these empires were the Aztec Empire and the Inca Empire. And you can see these names, Hernan Cortes and Francisco Pizarro, and these two men invaded these empires, and then these empires became Spanish. So in 1519, Hernan Cortes entered the Aztec capital in 1519 with an army of 600 men, and by 1521 the capital collapsed. Not only was this achieved with the help of armed forces, but also diseases like smallpox. After 30 years, the population had been reduced from 25 million to around 2 million. And this was how the Aztec Empire fell. The Inca Empire had a similar fate. In 1530s, Francisco Pizarro invaded the Inca Empire on behalf of Spain. Even this time, the most lethal weapon weren't weapons at all, but diseases. After the conquest, many natives were made to work in silver mines under terrible conditions. Now we'll talk about European countries, and the 5 main European countries that played a part in colonizing the world were Spain, Portugal, France, England, and Netherlands. Firstly, we'll talk about Portugal, and in 1498, Vasco da Gama landed in India and becoming the first person to find the sea route to India. Before this, they would go through the Middle East, and then they would get heavily taxed, so they wouldn't really make as much money as they could through trade. So what Europeans wanted to do was they wanted to find the sea route to India, and Vasco da Gama was the first one to do that in 1498. So Portugal wanted to gain wealth through commerce in India. When Vasco da Gama found the sea route to India, the Middle East lost its lucrative income generated from taxing, and this led to economic decline in the Middle Eastern empires. Despite gaining control of the spice trade, Portugal's fortune was not to be found in the east but in the west, and thousands of people immigrated from Portugal to Brazil and established plantations there, and that's how this was much more lucrative for them than the trade in India was. Even though Spain and Portugal started the expansion, this colonization, and they were the greatest colonial empires in the 1500s, France, England, and Netherlands joined them in the 1600s and became far more successful since they focused on trade, while Spain and Portugal were focused on consumption. So Spain focused on obtaining precious metals, but France, England, and Netherlands were selling stuff to Spain, so they were the ones who ended up with the wealth. Reasons behind European expansion, that's what we'll talk about now. Europeans wanted to leave their own continent and explore other continents. We've already discussed how Marco Polo's book and desire for adventure made Europeans leave their own continent in pursuit of other countries, but there were also other factors like curiosity about other cultures, commerce, and therefore an economic incentive. They wanted to spread civilization to the rest of the world. They wanted to win unsaved souls through mission, and there was also like this sense of competition between European states that wanted to expand. So they wanted to prove that their country was the best. And there's something called the 3 C's that's often used to describe the factors behind colonization, and those are civilization, that Europeans wanted to spread their civilization or civilization generally to the world. Christianity, mission, so they wanted to win unsaved souls, and then commerce. They wanted to, this was the economic incentive part, that they wanted to gain money through colonization. Why did they become successful? And that had to do with the fact that they had better navigation tools, they had better ships, they had better technology, and they had better weapons, and all of these things combined made their mission possible. And another thing that I wanted to talk about was that the monarchs gained more power, kings gained more power due to the fact that they had to sustain these huge military fleets, and they were the ones who approved and sponsored these voyages. So this is very important for the political development, that the king gained more influence and the feudal system gradually declined. This contributed to the development of modern politics. Something else that contributed to the political development, were the religious wars. And if you want to learn more about the religious wars, or if you want to learn more about the political development and the origins of the modern political system, you should watch the next 2 videos. Bye bye.